Victoria Pierce stepped out of her chauffeured Bentley, scanning the upscale Manhattan restaurant with the practiced eye of someone accustomed to assessing the value of everything at a glance. At 34, she had built a tech empire worth billions, but tonight she wasn't here to close a deal. She was here because her assistant had practically begged her to have a life outside work. A blind date. Victoria almost laughed at the absurdity of it. "Miss Pierce, welcome to Lumiere." The maitre d' smiled deferentially. "Your guest has already arrived." Victoria checked her watch, a rare Patek Philippe worth more than some people's annual salary. She was precisely on time. "He's early," she noted, mildly impressed. As she followed the maitre d' through the dimly lit restaurant, Victoria's attention was drawn to a broad-shouldered man sitting at a corner table. He wore a simple navy blazer that had seen better days, but it was well pressed, and he sat with a straight-backed confidence that caught her attention. When he noticed her approaching, he stood up all 6 feet of him, and Victoria was struck by his warm brown eyes and the genuine smile that transformed his face. "Miss Pierce, I'm Brian Bennett." His handshake was firm, his voice deep and assured. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Victoria nodded, taking her seat as the maitre d' pulled out her chair. "My assistant can be very persuasive when she wants to be," Brian chuckled, a rich sound that was surprisingly pleasant. "My sister said the same thing about herself when she arranged this. She's relentless." "Your sister is Melissa from my HR department, correct?" Victoria accepted the menu from the waiter, not bothering to open it. She always ordered the same thing at Lumiere. "That's right. She thinks I need to, what did she call it, rejoin the land of the living." He made air quotes with his fingers, an unexpectedly boyish gesture that didn't match his otherwise composed demeanor. Victoria found herself curious, despite her initial reluctance. "And why does she think that?" A shadow passed over Brian's face. "I've been focused on raising my daughter since my wife passed away 3 years ago." Victoria hadn't expected such honesty so quickly. Most men she met tried to impress her with tales of their own success. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, meaning it. "Thank you." Brian opened his menu, his eyes widening slightly at the prices. "Emma's 8 now. She's the reason I get up every morning." Something about his unguarded devotion to his daughter touched Victoria. "What do you do, Mr. Bennett?" "Brian, please." He looked up from the menu. "I'm a high school English teacher, but I'm between positions at the moment. Budget cuts." He shrugged, but Victoria could see the concern behind his casual demeanor. "I'm tutoring and doing some freelance editing to make ends meet until the new school year." Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd had dinner with someone who wasn't worth at least 8 figures. "That must be challenging," she said carefully. Brian's smile returned, pride evident in his expression. "We manage. Emma doesn't need designer clothes to be happy. She just needs stability and love." The waiter returned, and Victoria ordered her usual truffle risotto without looking at the menu. When it was Brian's turn, he ordered the least expensive pasta dish on the menu and water instead of wine. "Please, order whatever you'd like," Victoria insisted. "This dinner is my treat." A flash of something pride perhaps crossed Brian's face. "Thank you, but I'm fine with my choice. I'm not much of a drinker anyway, especially when I need to relieve the babysitter by 10. Victoria found herself intrigued by this man who seemed so different from anyone in her usual circle. Throughout the appetizer, she learned that Brian had been an award-winning teacher before the budget cuts at his private school. He spoke passionately about literature and his students, his eyes lighting up when he described helping teenagers connect with classic texts. "What about you?" Brian asked as their main courses arrived. "Melissa told me you run your own company, but she was surprisingly tight-lipped about the details." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "She didn't tell you who I am?" Brian shook his head. "Just that you're successful and single. She said I should Google you, but that felt like cheating." Victoria couldn't help but laugh. "I'm the founder and CEO of Pierce Innovations. We develop artificial intelligence solutions for healthcare." Brian's expression registered genuine interest, not the dollar signs she was accustomed to seeing in people's eyes when they learned who she was. That sounds fascinating. How did you get into that field? For the next hour, Victoria found herself telling Brian about her company's mission to make healthcare more accessible through technology. He asked intelligent questions and listened attentively, something Victoria rarely experienced outside of board meetings, and even then, people were usually listening for their own benefit. When Brian checked his watch and apologized that he needed to leave soon, Victoria was surprised to feel disappointed. The evening had passed quickly, and she'd enjoyed herself more than she had in a long time. "I'd better get the check," she said, signaling to the waiter. "Thank you for dinner," Brian said sincerely. "It's been a pleasure meeting you, Victoria." As they walked out of the restaurant, Victoria found herself reluctant to end the evening. "My driver can take you home," she offered. Brian hesitated before accepting. "That would be great, actually. The babysitter would appreciate me being early for once." In the back of her Bentley, Victoria was acutely aware of Brian's proximity. He smelled of clean soap and something subtly masculine that wasn't an expensive cologne. "This is quite a car," Brian commented, his hand running appreciatively over the leather seat. "It gets me from point A to point B," Victoria replied with a small smile. When they reached Brian's modest brownstone in Brooklyn, he turned to her with genuine warmth in his eyes. "I enjoyed tonight more than I expected to. Would it be presumptuous to ask if I could see you again?" Victoria surprised herself by nodding. "I'd like that." Brian's smile lit up his entire face. "Great, I'll call you." As her car pulled away, Victoria found herself looking back at the figure of Brian Bennett standing on the steps of his brownstone. Something about him had gotten under her skin, and for the first time in years, she was looking forward to a second date. The following week, Brian suggested meeting at a small Italian restaurant in his neighborhood. Victoria arrived wearing a simple black dress rather than her usual designer outfit, having spent an uncharacteristic amount of time deciding what to wear. "You look beautiful," Brian said when she arrived, his appreciation evident in his gaze. "Thank you." Victoria felt a flutter of pleasure at the compliment. "This place looks charming." "It's nothing fancy, but the food is incredible. The owner, Giuseppe, makes everything from scratch." The restaurant was cozy and filled with local families. No one recognized Victoria here, and she found it refreshing to be anonymous for once. "So, how was your week?" Brian asked after they ordered, the candlelight reflecting in his eyes. Victoria found herself telling him about a challenging negotiation with a hospital network. Brian listened attentively, asking perceptive questions that showed he was genuinely engaged. "What about you?" she asked. "Any luck with the job search?" A shadow crossed Brian's face. "Not yet. I had an interview at Westridge Academy, but they went with someone with more administrative experience." He shrugged, forcing a smile. "Something will turn up." Victoria could see the worry beneath his optimism. "What about Emma? How is she doing?" At the mention of his daughter, Brian's face transformed. He pulled out his phone and showed Victoria pictures of a gap-toothed little girl with her father's warm brown eyes and an impish smile. "She's amazing," he said proudly. "She's struggling a bit with math, but she's reading 2 grade levels above her age. Last night, she insisted on reading Charlotte's Web to me instead of the other way around." The love in Brian's voice when he spoke about his daughter touched something in Victoria. Her own childhood had been privileged but emotionally barren, with parents who viewed her as an investment rather than a child to be cherished. "She sounds wonderful," Victoria said softly. "You're clearly doing an excellent job with her." Brian's smile turned wistful. "I try." Some days are harder than others. She still asks about her mom sometimes, and it breaks my heart that I can't bring Catherine back for her. Victoria reached across the table and squeezed his hand impulsively. "But you're there for her. That's what matters." Their eyes met, and Victoria felt something shift between them. Brian turned his hand to clasp hers, his thumb gently stroking her palm. "Thank you for saying that," he said quietly. "Sometimes I worry it's not enough." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation and laughter. Victoria couldn't remember the last time she'd enjoyed someone's company so much. When Brian walked her to her car, he hesitated before leaning in to kiss her cheek. "I'd like to see you again," he said. "But next time, I want to cook for you. Nothing fancy, but I make a mean lasagna." Victoria found herself nodding. "I'd like that." The following Saturday, Victoria arrived at Brian's brownstone with an expensive bottle of wine. She felt uncharacteristically nervous as she climbed the steps to his front door. Brian answered, wearing jeans and a simple button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. "Welcome to our humble abode," he said with a warm smile. The apartment was modest but immaculate. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with classics and children's literature. Framed artwork that was clearly done by a child hung proudly on the walls. "Emma's with my sister tonight," Brian explained, taking the wine. "I thought it might be nice for us to have some adult conversation." Victoria looked around, noting the worn but well-maintained furniture. "Your home is lovely. It's small, but it works for us." Brian led her to the kitchen, where delicious aromas filled the air. "I hope you like Italian. It smells amazing." Victoria leaned against the counter, watching as Brian checked on the lasagna in the oven. "Can I help with anything?" she asked, feeling strangely out of place. In her world, staff handled such tasks. Brian smiled. "You could toss the salad if you'd like." Victoria rolled up her sleeves and set to work, following Brian's instructions. There was something intimate about preparing a meal together, something she'd never experienced before. Over dinner, Victoria found herself sharing stories from her childhood that she rarely discussed. "My parents saw me as a project rather than a daughter," she admitted. Everything was about achievement. Emotional connections weren't part of the equation. Brian listened thoughtfully. "That explains a lot about your drive, but it must have been lonely." No one had ever described her childhood that way, but Brian had hit the nail on the head. "It was," Victoria acknowledged. "I compensated by becoming exceptional at everything I did." "And you succeeded brilliantly," Brian said with genuine admiration. "But at what cost?" The question hung in the air between them. Victoria had never considered that her success might have come at a personal price. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never really thought about it." After dinner, they moved to the small living room with glasses of wine. Sitting on the comfortable couch, Brian told Victoria about meeting his late wife in college, their early struggles, and the joy of Emma's birth. He spoke of Catherine's cancer diagnosis and the 18 months of treatments that followed, ending with her peaceful death at home. "The hardest part was telling Emma," Brian said, his voice rough with emotion. "She was only 5. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that her mother isn't coming back?" Victoria found herself blinking back tears. Without thinking, she moved closer to Brian and took his hand. "I can't imagine how difficult that must have been." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Brian reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind Victoria's ear, his touch sending shivers down her spine. "Victoria," he said softly, his voice husky. "I know our worlds are completely different, but I haven't felt this way about anyone since Catherine. I'd like to see where this could go, if you're willing." Victoria's heart raced. In that moment, she realized she'd been falling for Brian Bennett since their first meeting. "I'm willing," she whispered. Brian leaned forward and kissed her gently. His lips were warm and tender, the kiss conveying both passion and respect. When they pulled apart, Victoria felt breathless. "I should warn you," Brian said with a smile that didn't quite hide his seriousness. "I'm a package deal. Emma will always be my priority." Victoria nodded. "I wouldn't expect anything less." 2 weeks later, Victoria was scheduled to meet Emma for the first time. She arrived at Prospect Park on a sunny Saturday morning, carrying a small gift-wrapped package and feeling more nervous than she had before any business presentation. She spotted them by the playground, Brian pushing a little girl on a swing, both of them laughing. The sight made her heart contract with an unfamiliar emotion. "Higher, Daddy, higher," Emma squealed. "Any higher and you'll touch the clouds," Brian responded, giving another push. Victoria approached slowly, not wanting to intrude on their moment. When Brian saw her, his face lit up in a way that made her pulse quicken. "Emma, remember I told you about my friend Victoria? She's here to join us for our picnic." Emma looked at Victoria with curious brown eyes so like her father's. "Do you like peanut butter and jelly?" she asked seriously. Victoria smiled. "I do, but I haven't had it in a very long time," Emma nodded sagely. "Daddy makes the best PB&J. He cuts off the crusts and everything. Then I can't wait to try it." Victoria held out the package. "I brought you something. Your dad mentioned you like to read." Emma accepted the gift with wide eyes. "Thank you. Can I open it now, Daddy?" At Brian's nod, Emma tore into the wrapping paper to reveal a beautifully illustrated edition of Anne of Green Gables. "My dad used to read this to me when I was about your age," Victoria explained. "It's about a girl with a big imagination." "Like me," Emma exclaimed. "Daddy says I have enough imagination for 10 people." "That you do, sweetheart," Brian agreed, ruffling his daughter's hair. He met Victoria's eyes over Emma's head, his gaze warm with appreciation. The three of them spent the day together, picnicking on the grass and exploring the park. Victoria found herself enchanted by Emma's exuberance and quick mind. The little girl asked endless questions, from why the sky was blue to how Victoria's company made computers help doctors. By late afternoon, Emma had warmed up enough to take Victoria's hand as they walked toward the ice cream stand. "Do you have any kids?" she asked bluntly. "Emma," Brian cautioned gently. "It's all right," Victoria assured him. "No, Emma, I don't have any children." Emma considered this. "Why not?" "Don't you like kids?" Victoria thought carefully about her answer. "I like children very much. I just haven't found the right time or the right person to have a family with." Emma nodded seriously. "My mom died. She's in heaven now, but Daddy says she watches over me." "I'm sure she does," Victoria said, her throat tight. "Your dad tells me she was wonderful." "She was," Emma confirmed. "She made the best cookies. Daddy tries, but his are always too crunchy." Victoria laughed, and after a moment, Brian joined in. "Brutal honesty, that's my girl," he said, scooping Emma up for a hug. As Victoria watched them together, she felt a yearning for something she'd never known. She wanted a family, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with achievement or wealth. Over the next few months, Victoria found herself spending more and more time with Brian and Emma. She joined them for movie nights, helped Emma with her math homework, and even attended Emma's school play, where the little girl played a very enthusiastic tree. Brian's financial situation remained precarious. Though he'd picked up more tutoring clients, he still hadn't secured a full-time teaching position for the fall. Victoria longed to help, but she sensed his pride would make financial assistance difficult for him to accept. One evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Victoria broached the subject carefully. "Brian, I've been thinking. The private school attached to my company's childcare center needs an English teacher for the fall. The director is an old friend. Would you be interested in applying?" Brian stiffened slightly. "Is this a real position, or are you creating one for me?" "It's real," Victoria assured him. "The previous teacher is moving to California. The position was going to be posted next week. I just thought you might want a head start." Brian was quiet for a long moment. "I appreciate you thinking of me, but I need to earn a position on my own merits, not because I'm dating the boss." Victoria took his hand. "I understand that. All I'm offering is information about the opening. You'd interview like any other candidate. In fact, I'll ask my friend not to mention our connection. Would that make you more comfortable?" Brian's expression softened. "Yes, it would. Thank you for understanding." 2 weeks later, Brian called Victoria, excitement evident in his voice. "I got the job." The director said my teaching philosophy aligned perfectly with the school's approach. Victoria felt a surge of happiness for him. "That's wonderful. Did he mention the connection to me?" "Not at all. In fact, he seemed surprised when I mentioned knowing you at the end of the interview. Brian's voice was filled with pride. This is going to change everything for Emma and me. The salary is better than my last position, and the hours will let me be home when she gets out of school. I'm so happy for you, Victoria said sincerely. There's more, Brian continued. They offer subsidized housing for faculty in a building near the school. We could move closer to the city, cut my commute in half. Victoria felt a surprising pang at the thought of Brian and Emma leaving their cozy brownstone. That sounds perfect, she said, pushing aside her selfish response. There's just one thing, Brian said, his voice turning serious. I need to know where we're headed, Victoria. Emma's already attached to you, and this move would be a big change for her. I don't want to uproot her life if... If what? Victoria prompted when he trailed off. Brian took a deep breath. If you're not planning to stick around, I know our worlds are different. I know I can't offer you the luxury you're accustomed to. But these past months have been the happiest I've had since Catherine died, and I hope you feel something too. Victoria's heart raced. I do, she admitted. I've never felt this way about anyone, Brian. I love you, and I love Emma too. There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a moment, Victoria feared she'd said too much too soon. I love you too, Brian finally said, his voice rough with emotion. Would you come over? I want to tell you this in person. Victoria broke several traffic laws getting to Brian's apartment. He opened the door and immediately pulled her into his arms, his kiss conveying everything words couldn't. I love you, he whispered against her lips. I didn't think I'd ever say that to anyone again. Victoria held him tightly, feeling as though her heart might burst. I love you too, both of you. The next few months were a whirlwind. Brian and Emma moved into the faculty housing near the school, and Victoria found herself spending most evenings and weekends with them. Emma blossomed with the stability of their new situation, and Brian thrived in his new teaching position. Victoria watched with growing contentment as their lives became increasingly intertwined. She helped Emma decorate her new bedroom, joined them for parent-teacher conferences, and even learned to make a decent, if not perfect, peanut butter and jelly sandwich. One evening in December, Victoria arrived at their apartment to find it lit only by candles and Christmas lights. Emma greeted her at the door, dressed in her best holiday dress, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Daddy says I can stay up until 9 because it's a special occasion, she announced importantly. And I get to be part of the surprise. What surprise? Victoria asked, bemused. Brian appeared from the kitchen, looking handsome in a suit she'd never seen before. That would ruin the surprise, wouldn't it? He said, kissing her cheek. Dinner's almost ready. Throughout the meal, Victoria noticed Emma and Brian exchanging meaningful glances and suppressing smiles. When they'd finished eating, Emma disappeared into her room and returned carrying a small wrapped package. This is for you, she said, placing it in Victoria's hands. Daddy and I picked it out together. Victoria unwrapped the gift to find a beautiful leather-bound edition of Anne of Green Gables, a match to the one she'd given Emma months ago. Open it, Emma urged, bouncing on her toes. Victoria opened the cover to find an inscription. To my kindred spirit and the woman who completes our family, will you marry us? Love, Brian and Emma. She looked up, tears filling her eyes, to find Brian kneeling beside her chair, a small velvet box in his hand. Victoria Pierce, you walked into our lives and turned them upside down in the best possible way, he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. I never thought I'd find love again, but you proved me wrong. Emma and I both love you more than words can say. Will you marry me and become a permanent part of our family? Victoria looked from Brian to Emma, who was watching with hopeful eyes. In that moment, she realized that all her wealth and success meant nothing compared to the love of these two people. Yes, she said through her tears. Yes to both of you. Brian slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple but elegant diamond that she knew must have stretched his budget. Emma launched herself into Victoria's arms with a squeal of delight. "Does this mean I can call you Mom?" she asked. Victoria looked at Brian, uncertain how to respond. He nodded, his eyes glistening. "If that's what you want, sweetheart, I want to," Emma declared. "I have a mom in heaven and one here on earth. I'm the luckiest girl ever." Victoria held Emma close, overwhelmed by the child's easy acceptance. "I would be honored," she whispered. They were married the following spring in a small ceremony in Prospect Park, with Emma serving as flower girl and ring bearer. Victoria's parents, surprisingly supportive after meeting Brian and Emma, sat in the front row alongside Brian's sister Melissa, who looked smugly pleased with her matchmaking success. As they exchanged vows under a canopy of cherry blossoms, Victoria marveled at how completely her life had changed in just over a year. She had gone from a lonely billionaire focused solely on business to part of a loving family, with a husband who supported her ambitions and a stepdaughter who filled her days with laughter and wonder. At the reception, Brian pulled her onto the dance floor for their first dance as husband and wife. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Victoria replied, resting her head on his shoulder. "And you," Brian's arms tightened around her. "I thought my chance at this kind of happiness ended when Catherine died. I'm grateful every day that I was wrong." Emma joined them on the dance floor, and Brian lifted her up so the three of them could sway together. "We're officially a family now," Emma announced. "Forever and ever." "Forever and ever," Victoria agreed, her heart full. 2 years later, Victoria sat in the hospital bed, cradling her newborn son while Emma peered at her baby brother with fascination. Brian sat beside them, his arm around Victoria, his expression one of wonder and joy. "He's so tiny," Emma whispered, gently touching the baby's hand. "I'm going to teach him everything I know." "I'm sure you will, sweetheart," Brian said, kissing the top of his daughter's head. Victoria looked at her family, her brilliant, kind husband, her precocious stepdaughter, and now their newborn son, and felt a contentment she'd never known before. Her life had everything she'd never known she needed. "I love you," she said to Brian, her voice soft but sure. "Thank you for giving me a family." Brian leaned over to kiss her gently. "Thank you for taking a chance on a poor English teacher with a beat-up blazer and a precocious daughter." "Best blind date ever," Victoria murmured against his lips. Emma rolled her eyes dramatically. "You guys are so mushy, but I guess it's okay because you're in love." Victoria and Brian laughed, and their baby son opened his eyes as if wanting to join in the family moment. As Victoria looked at the 3 people who had become her world, she marveled at how the most valuable things in life couldn't be measured in billions. They could only be measured in love.